Good afternoon, everyone. Our apologies. We're running just a couple of minutes behind, technical difficulties. You wouldn't know what that's like working on a computer, but we're here now, and we do apologize for running behind. So today we're going to be covering the Plastic Free EcoChallenge with the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. We have their Director of Sustainability with us today. Her name is Christina Blazer. She's going to do an introduction here soon. My name is Amy Densborn, and I work for SWACO. So we're going to be covering this content together. So real quickly, before we jump into the contents of today's webinar, GoToWebinar is the platform we are using. It's not as user-friendly as Zoom and the others out there, but I wanted to make sure you understand how to use it best. And so you'll see on your control panel, you have a couple different options. One of them is the questions box. If you click on the question mark, that allows you to ask your questions at any point in time during today's session. We are going to be covering everyone's questions at the end of today's webinar. So feel free to type those in whenever they pop into your mind. And then we also have 3 handouts that we are sharing with you today. If you double click on the each one of the handouts, they're PDFs. We have a PDF of the slides from today's presentation. We have one from the zoo. It's all about behavior change towards the greater good of sustainability, how small changes can have a big impact. And then we also have a handout from our partners at Rumpke Waste and Recycling about the end users, where they send the materials to be recycled and made into new products here in Central Ohio. If you're having a hard time downloading the handouts during today's webinar, don't worry about it. Just shoot me an email when we're done, and I'll be happy to send those your way. Real quick, for those of you who maybe haven't heard of us at SWACO, Christina, I'm going to go ahead and put you on mute. I'm getting some feedback here. For those of you who haven't heard of us at SWACO, we are the Franklin County Solid Waste District. SWACO stands for the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio. You can understand why we abbreviate it. And really, our mission is very simple. We want to reduce our reliance on the landfill. We own and operate the landfill in Franklin County, but we strive to get as much material out of the landfill as we possibly can. And how we do that is by developing services and programs, such as some of the images on the screen. So everything from public recycling drop-off programs to hosting collection events for hard to recycle materials like electronic waste, tires, and pharmaceutical waste. We offer grant funding to universities, nonprofits, and communities to help them reduce their waste and recycle more. And then we are striving always to educate the Franklin County community, Central Ohio, so they can feel empowered to reduce their waste, recycle right, and compost their food waste. So the truth of it is, as a community, we are creating more waste. Central Ohio is a growing community. More people typically means more waste. Annually, our local landfill accepts just over 1.1 million tons of material. But the good news is we're doing a pretty good job at diverting that waste. 51% of material that we generate as a community is diverted through recycling or composting, whereas the national average is right about 34%. However, even though we do have a pretty high diversion rate, 76% of the material could have been recycled or composted. It actually doesn't belong in the landfill. While this presentation today is about steps that you can take to reduce your plastic consumption, I also want you to understand the types of material that end up in our landfill. 25% of the material inside the landfill is truly recyclable material. So I'm talking about things that belong in our blue bins to go on to become new products. Recyclable plastics make up about 4% of the stream. So these are going to be bottles, jugs, tubs, and cups. Cardboard is the #2 largest source of material in the landfill. And you're probably thinking, that's probably because of Amazon Prime and online shopping. Ding, 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 you're correct. So what's SWACO doing to help us recover this material, help the community recover the material? We have a variety of educational campaigns as well as programs that are free and open to anyone that doesn't have access to recycling. We have 51 locations all around the community for folks to drop off their recyclables, and we take it to Rumpke to be serviced and turned into new materials. Real quick, because we always get a lot of questions about what's accepted for recycling. This isn't the bulk of today. This isn't by any means the topic of today's content, but I want you to understand that when you put something in your blue recycling cart at home, or you take it to a SWACO drop-off location, it is getting recycled. It is getting a second life as a new product. We have very strong recycling economy right here in Ohio, and I'm going to talk more about that on the next slide. So real quick, all paper and cardboard is accepted. If it tears, it goes in the blue bin. Rumpke recently expanded their program to now include paper cups as well as paper ice cream cartons. Again, if it tears, it goes in the bin. Plastics. This is what we're going to be spending the majority of today talking about, plastics and how plastics can be detrimental to our environment and the wildlife. Plastics a lot of plastics can be recycled, assuming they get it in the blue bin. The big concern is when plastics end up in our local environment, when they become litter, or when they end up blowing out from like a truck or something like that and end up like litter. That's when they end up going in our waterways and end up in the ocean. So obviously it's really important to do your best to make sure that your materials make their way into the proper container. Bottles and jugs, I think, are pretty straightforward. Your detergent jugs or milk jugs. Tubs are things like butter and yogurt, something that you might get from the deli or the dairy section. And then plastic cups are also now included in the program. Make sure your lids stay on all your plastics, because that means the lid will also be recycled. Glass bottles and jars, all colors are accepted. Metal cans and metal cups, all carton containers. And the biggest thing I recommend to you, if you cannot remember all of these rules, because I know it's a lot, is to try to remember to keep all your recyclables loose. Don't put them inside a plastic bag. Plastic bags are a no-no in the recycling bin. However, they can go back to the retailer for recycling. Giant Eagle, Kroger, Walmart, Meijer, places like that. So Rumpke is the Central Ohio recycling processor. They find end users that purchase our materials and give them a second life as something new. We really do count ourselves lucky to have Rumpke as the recycling processor here in Franklin County. 100% of everything we put in our cart stays in our country, whereas 80% of it stays right here in our state. Here are a couple examples of how we have a really strong recycling economy in Ohio. Steel doesn't even leave our city. It stays right here in Columbus. Plastic tubs go to Ironton, plastic jugs go to New Albany, and plastic bottles go to Bowling Green. All the glass goes to Zanesville, where it's going to become fiberglass insulation and new glass food packaging. Paper and cardboard goes to Wapakoneta, where it's going to become new Amazon boxes for those e-commerce shipments. So you've likely heard a lot of information on the news and the media how recycling isn't working. I cannot speak to how recycling is working across the nation. I can only speak to how it works here in Central Ohio. The numbers that you see on the bottom of plastics simply just are to identify the resin code of the material. Doesn't necessarily mean an item is accepted for recycling. It's always a good idea to double check with your local communities program to confirm what's accepted and what's not accepted. So a few slides ago, we talked about plastics, and you'll notice I did not talk about the numbering system. Instead, I talked about the shape. Is it a bottle, a jug, a tub, or a cup? That is how you can identify if your material belongs in the blue bin. I just wanted you to understand what these numbers mean. So it's just to identify the type of plastic resin the plastic is made from. And these numbers might be getting the chopping block here soon, because for a long time, these numbers have been used incorrectly. So the US EPA, in conjunction with other environmentalist groups, are really urging the Federal Trade Commission to update their language with these numbers and to remove the chasing arrow. As it stands right now, a lot of companies are purposely misleading people by labeling throwaway plastic as being recyclable. We all know that's just not true. So in 2021, California banned chasing arrows on products unless they met the 100% recyclable standards. And you may be asking yourself, well, what types of plastics fit the bill for being readily recyclable or 100% recyclable? So those are typically going to be your 1s, 2s, and 5s. These are the types of plastics that have stable end users and buyers and will likely be purchased to be made into something new. All right, so we have a trivia question for you today. I'm going to launch it here on the screen. I want folks to select the answer that they think is correct. What is plastic's largest market right now? Do we think it's textiles, construction, transportation, or packaging? Give your best guess. I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds until we have give everybody a chance to vote. We've got 50% of folks voting. So far, for what it's worth, you guys are a smart group. You know what the answer is. All right, looks like we got just about 75% of folks in. I'm gonna give it a few more seconds. I'm closing it out. All right. So it looks like the majority of folks, 63% in fact, picked packaging, and that is correct. So the packaging industry makes up just about 36% of all of plastics market, with construction coming in second, textiles third, and transportation fourth. I found that data, which was also found from the federal EPA, to be surprising. I thought the answer would have been textiles, honestly, seeing how so much of our clothing is now manufactured from PET. That's #1 plastic resin. Polyester is also what it's called. So much clothing is being manufactured very cheaply and from leftover plastics. I thought the answer was clothing, so that surprised me, but not you guys. You guys knew the right answer. So really, recycling is great, but recycling is not going to solve the plastic crisis. We simply cannot recycle our way out of plastic pollution. The biggest impact we can all have on this planet is to consume less stuff. And so by reusing everyday items, like bringing our reusable bags to the grocery store, choosing to say no thank you to that single-use disposable straw or knife or fork when we go out to eat, bringing our own cutlery that's reusable, that is the biggest way we're going to have an impact on our planet. So with all that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Christina Bleezer, our friend at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. She is their new Director of Sustainability. She's going to tell us more about the Plastic Free EcoChallenge and other ways that we can all have a positive impact on our planet and the health of our waterways. Let me get you unmuted. All right, Christina, you should be up.
Hi, hi everyone. I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you guys taking. And just to provide a bit of background about me, I have an undergraduate degree in environmental and sustainability politics from Ohio University. Received that in 2015, and I have a master's of science in environmental studies, which I also received from Ohio University in 2017. I have worked mainly in higher education sustainability so far. I worked at the Office of Sustainability at Ohio University. I worked as the sustainability coordinator at Kent State University for their dining services contractor, Aramark. And most recently, I was a sustainability coordinator at Oklahoma State University. So as you guys can see by the graphic on the screen, in order to provide a bit of perspective on the overwhelming plastics problem, I wanted to provide you with some facts and figures regarding plastic production, plastic disposal, and everything in between. Since large-scale production began in the early 1950s, we've created more than 8.3 billion tons of plastic, and more than half of that was produced in the last 13 years. Of that 8.3 billion tons of plastic, only 9% of it has been recycled, while 79% of it still sits in landfills or can be found in the natural environment, like the ocean. 90% of all plastic is produced with chemicals that are sourced from fossil fuels, so they're inherently not sustainable products. However, the biggest culprit and the biggest type of plastic that we have polluting our systems would be single-use plastics. So those are going to be items that are mainly used for packaging and serviceware, so bottles, wrappers, straws, and plastic bags. Of the 381 million tons of plastic waste produced globally, 50% of it is for single-use items. Single-use products like plastic grocery bags are used for less than 15 minutes before they're thrown away. And because the world uses over 500 billion plastic bags a year, that's about 150 for each person on Earth. This short lifespan and throwaway culture it has created can have devastating effects. 50 million straws are used in the US per day, while 500 billion plastic bottles are used every year, meaning there are 66 times as many bottles as there are humans on the planet. Up to 12.7 million tons of plastic enters the ocean every year. That's equivalent to 2 Empire State Buildings worth of plastic going into the ocean every month. The ocean itself is especially vulnerable to plastic waste. Excess marine pollution has helped create 500 dead zones, which is equivalent to the size of the United Kingdom in the ocean, and the number is expected to double every decade moving forward. Once plastic enters the ocean, waves and currents and storms can carry the plastics to even the furthest reaches of the ocean, where they accumulate into large gyres or become embedded in shorelines and delicate ecosystems. They've even been found on uninhabited islands. By 2050, the amount of plastic in the ocean could outweigh the entire fish population. Advance. So those are just some pictures to provide you a bit of context of what plastics are looking like in the ocean specifically. There are a number of ways that the plastics can find their way. Like Amy mentioned earlier, they can be blown off trucks or out of recycling bins that might be in the curbside collection bin. A plastic bag might just blow out of your hand as you're trying to load something into your car or throw it away or whatever it might be. So there's a whole host of ways that it can, and you'll find just about every type of plastic in the ocean. Advance, please. But the real danger comes to microplastics. So the United Nations Environmental Program considers microplastics and the even smaller nanoplastics among the world's greatest environmental challenges. The main problem is their permeance and toxicity. Fossil fuel-based products like plastics are primarily non-biodegradable. Sunlight does eventually photodegrade the bonds in the plastic polymers, which is reducing them to smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. When plastic floating on or near the ocean surface is exposed to sunlight, they release methane and ethylene, 2 potent greenhouse gases. Photodegradation also releases colorants and chemicals like BPA into the water around it. It's estimated that microplastics make up as much as 85% of plastic pollution found on the shorelines around the world. Once it enters the ocean and begins to break down, macroplastics become microplastics and microplastics become nanoplastics, making recovery even more unlikely. Some of the largest concerns were focused on microbeads, which are less than 5 millimeters in diameter and are about the size of a sesame seed. These plastic beads are added to many personal care products such as cleansers and toothpastes. And And when you wash off the product that contains microbeads, up to 100,000 particles of plastic can be sent into the ocean in a single shower. These microbeads were so problematic that in 2015, Congress amended the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act by passing the Microbead Free Waters Act of 2015. This prohibits the manufacturing, packaging, and distribution of rinse-off cosmetics containing plastic microbeads. Amy also mentioned that she thought textiles were going to be the largest pollutant, which is a very valid guess because it is a very large contributor to plastic pollution. With a single wash, one fleece garment can release 2 grams worth of synthetic fibers, or that's the equivalent of 100,000 fibers in one wash alone. The fibers like these can be released from clothing made of polyester, nylon, spandex, and acrylic. They can get as small as zooplankton, and can impede the growth and efficiency of photosynthesis and microalgae, which is beneficial for the environment. When microplastics or plastic pollution itself became a main issue, scientists initially assumed that the material was destined to float in garbage patches all across the ocean. They assumed that the density of the plastics would cause it to float to the surface. But surface surveys have accounted for only about 1% of the ocean's estimated plastics. A recent model found that 99.8% of plastics that entered the ocean since 1950 have sunk below the first 100 feet of the ocean. Scientists have found 10,000 times more microplastics on the seafloor than it contains on surface waters. So I'm sure most of you, if you're aware of any sort of plastic pollution, you've heard of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So it's actually one of 5 major rotating areas in the world where plastic litter tends to accumulate. These ocean plastics can concentrate in large systems of circular ocean currents. They result in huge offshore patches of floating and submerged debris. In the Northern Pacific Ocean, 4 ocean currents merge to form the circling North Pacific Gyre, which spans the western US to Japan and Hawaii to California. There are 2 major areas where the plastic concentrates, an eastern plastic cluster as well as a western. That's the one that's known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So it's best known for the fact of during the early 1990s, when plastic started accumulating there, it actually largely went unnoticed. It didn't become problematic until large amounts of plastic started accumulating in a single area. So the Great Pacific Garbage Patch stretches around 620,000 square miles. So it's twice the area of Texas and 3 times the size of France. While they don't have an exact number of how much plastic is in the GPGP, the plastic mass is estimated about 80,000 tons. So that's equivalent to 500 jumbo jets. 1.8 trillion pieces of plastic were estimated to be floating in the patch, or 250 pieces of plastic debris for every human in the world. Half of the plastic debris in the GPGP is from fishing nets, known as ghost nets. The result of increasingly intensive fishing in the Asian Pacific region has caused many to leave behind things like fishing nets, which just float on surface water layers. Floating at the surface of the GPGP is 180 times more plastic than marine life. However, animals are found migrating through or inhabiting this area, and they're very likely to consume plastic from or in the patch due to that fact. For example, sea turtles caught by fisheries operating within and around the patch can have up to 74% of their diets consist of ocean plastics. Next. So plastic pollution can now be found everywhere in the ocean, and most marine species are likely to have encountered it today. According to a conservative estimate of current research, 2,141 species so far have been found to encounter plastic in their natural environments. 17 of those species are affected on the IUCN's red list of threatened species. Plastics can't be digested and don't pass readily through the digestive tract, which means eating it can cause a wide range of complications for marine species, including starvation, malnutrition, intestinal blockages, and intake of toxins, all of which can lead to death. Macroplastics like fishing nets entangle oxygen-breathing marine life, such as dolphins, seals, sea turtles, and other animals, often drowning them. Sea turtles frequently swallow plastic bags, mistaking them for jellyfish, their main prey. The plastic then fills their stomach, creating a false sense of satiation or blockages in the digestive system, which often cause them to die of starvation. A recent study found that all 7 species of sea turtle from the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and the Mediterranean Sea had traces of microplastics in their stomach. In 2018, a sperm whale washed up on the coast of Spain with 64 pounds of plastic in its stomach. Upwards of 186 species of seabird have been documented eating plastic. Now, smaller surface items like plastic resin pellets or those microbeads are tiny toxic granules that are shipped in bulk around the world and then melted down at the manufacturing sites and remodeled into commercial plastics. They float on the sea surface, and seabirds often mistake them for fish eggs that they harvest and feed to their young. It's predicted that plastic ingestion will continue to increase in seabirds and that it will reach 99% of all species by 2050. A large threat to marine apex predators such as great white sharks and orcas is the cumulative impact of microplastics in the food chain and the bioaccumulation of toxic chemicals found in plastics. Biomagnification occurs when chemicals build up in the fatty tissues of animals that are eaten other contaminated species. The higher up the food chain you go, the greater the concentration of toxins. Orcas have been found with some of the greatest and the highest deposits of chemicals in their fatty tissue and in their breast milk, which they use to feed their young. These toxins include endocrine disruptors and persistent organic pollutants. Endocrine disruptors interfere with hormones, disrupt breeding, development, and behavior in many kinds of marine life. Even some plastics that are labeled as food safe can be highly toxic to aquatic animals and people alike. Persistent organic pollutants are long-lasting substances, such as PCB and BPA, that affect organisms and environmental health. Because they don't degrade, they can be transported over long distances by water and wind, eliciting long and lasting impacts far from their point of origin. Studies have shown altered or decreased food uptake and negative impacts on growth, immune response, fertility, and reproduction, as well as altered cell functions and behaviors in the impacted species, with levels of harm related directly to exposure of plastics. Next. Something that I think is often overlooked is when we talk about species or the impact on wildlife, something that is perhaps the most vulnerable are coral reefs. So they're some of the most diverse and valuable ecosystems on Earth. They provide habitat, feeding, spawning, and nursery grounds for over 1 million aquatic species. Over 500 federally managed fish and invertebrate species depend upon coral reefs and related habitats, including 4 endangered species. Although coral reefs cover less than 0.2% of the sea, they run along more than 90,000 miles of coastline. Due to their location in shallow coastal waters, they're crucial to the protection of the coasts of more than 100 countries. Their construction makes them very effective for absorbing wave energy and reducing coastal erosion. Barrier reefs help stabilize mangroves and seagrass beds, which can be easily uprooted by large waves and heavy currents. Erosion prevention is particularly important in coastal areas such as the Florida Keys, where much of the shore is lined with residential homes and commercial buildings. Most corals and sponges are filter feeders, which means that they consume particulate matter suspended in the water column. This contributes to the enhanced quality and clarity of our nearby waters. Over 275 million people live within 20 miles of a coral reef, and as a result, coral reefs are an important source of food for many human communities. Reef species comprise of roughly a quarter of all fish caught in the developing world in island communities. According to research, a well-managed reef ecosystem can sustain catches of between 5 to 15 tons of fish and crustaceans per square kilometer. On many small islands, a huge portion of economic development is dependent on coastal tourism. Therefore, local economies benefit an enormous amount from reef ecosystems, generating billions of dollars from visitors to coral reefs. Furthermore, income generated from fishing is also important to small and developing countries. For example, studies suggest that revenue generated from coral reef fisheries amounts to $29.8 billion globally. Coral reefs are an area more contaminated by plastic and other human-derived debris than any other marine ecosystem that has been evaluated. Plastic pollution deprives corals, sponge, and bottom-dwelling animals of light, food, and oxygen, making sediment oxygen deficient and reducing the number of organisms in the sediment. A study was conducted that spanned more than 2 dozen locations across the Indian, Pacific, and Atlantic Oceans. For the study, researchers conducted more than 1,200 visual surveys across 84 shallow reef ecosystems located in 14 countries. Of the total debris, 88% were macroplastics larger than about 2 inches. An island chain off the southeast coast of Africa was the worst affected location, with nearly 85,000 items of plastic in every square kilometer. Fishing lines entangled 65% of coral colonies in Hawaii, and 80% of those colonies were entirely or partially dead. Even in the remote Arctic deep sea, up to 20% of sponge colonies have been entangled with plastics, and entanglements increase over time. 89% of reefs containing plastics show some sign of disease. In addition, mangroves, which provide many coastal communities with food, security, and flood defenses, among other services, are often close to river mouths, where plastic pollution accumulates and gets trapped in their complex root systems. Some of the world's highest litter densities have been recorded in mangrove forests, with higher pollution levels correlating with lower tree health and community health overall. Images from remotely operated vehicles have shown plastic bags drifting 10,898 meters below sea level in the Mariana Trench, the deepest known place in the world's oceans. A 2017 study found that at least 50% of animals at the deepest places in the ocean, like the challenge deep in the Mariana Trench, had plastic in their stomachs. Among the discovered plastics were synthetic fibers like rayon that are commonly used in clothing. Scientists have even found traces of 17 different types of plastics embedded in core samples they've taken from Arctic sea ice. Of the 100,000 river outlets that feed into the ocean, it was found that 1,000 of them were responsible for 80% of the plastic that enters the ocean this way, meaning that 1% of rivers in the world are responsible for over 80% of all plastics. Of the top 10, 7 are in the Philippines, 2 are in India, and 1 is Malaysia. The Pasig River in the Philippines alone accounts for 6.4% of global river plastics, with the next highest being one in Malaysia at 1.33%. The top 5 plastic emitting countries are all located in Asia: the Philippines, India, Malaysia, China, and Indonesia, which Asia is the continent that contributes the most river plastics, with about 79.7% of them coming from there. Next. So, as Amy previously mentioned, and I'm sure many of you are aware, July is Plastic Free July. It started off with an Australian movement that is centered around decreasing your overall plastic usage. Now, within our family of parks, which includes the Columbus Zoo Aquarium, Zambezi Bay, the Safari Golf Course, and the Wilds, we recycle all the commonly known materials like cardboard, plastic bottles, aluminum cans, glass, and paper. We offer aluminum ball cups for all of our events, and at Zambezi Bay, if you were to get drinks, those can be recycled or reused. However, we do have additional programs that allow us to recycle things like textiles, our old uniform shirts, plastic packaging material, Christmas lights during wild lights, electronics, styrofoam, construction and demolition material, and wood, such as when we redid our wooden roller coaster in 2019. We also compost all of our animal waste and bedding. We composted 1,470 tons last year. But this month, we're targeting plastic reduction, and we're working hard to limit as much as we can. The Plastic Free EcoChallenge is a free service where you'll create your own challenge to refuse and reduce single-use plastic for a month. With practical and sustainable actions spanning all experience levels, no matter where you are on your sustainability journey, there are actions for you in this EcoChallenge. Throughout the month, you'll choose your own path to plasticless living, track your actions, find inspiration and camaraderie, and watch your collective impact add up. The extensive library of action resources and the collective participant feed means you'll never be alone in your challenge and that you'll never be left asking, what do I do now? Plastic Free EcoChallenge was created and developed in partnership with the Columbus Zoo Aquarium and EcoChallenge.org. And it's supported by a robust network of zoos and aquariums across North America. Together, we are building a sustainable plastic-free world. Next. These are the main categories where all of your action items will be broken down into. The action items can pertain to daily actions and things that you can change, small behavioral changes, all the way up to things like a one-off action of watching a documentary that talks about plastic production or the reduction of plastic usage. Next. So these are some examples of the actions from the food and personal care categories. So skipping the plastic straw, use reusable water bottles, use reusable containers, buy a bamboo toothbrush, choose steel razors instead of plastic handled ones, and buy beauty products and sustainable packaging, or you can buy sustainable beauty products themselves as well. You can DIY things. There's so many things you can do in that sphere that reducing your plastic usage overall is easier. Next. So for your community, you can schedule a volunteer event where you do a cleanup effort, get on the river shore, or litter around your community or a park. In addition, you can share what you're learning on social media, so you help educate other people about what you're doing and why it's important. For lifestyle, you can bring usable utensils, bottles, and containers when you travel, watch a documentary, buy clothes made of natural fibers like cotton, use glass baby bottles instead of the plastic ones. Next. So for your pets, buy a scooper instead of using multiple plastic bags. You can make your own pet treats. For your family, use cloth diapers. Don't use glitter. Limit it as much as you can. They do make biodegradable glitter now. And spend time learning together and educating and teaching your family about the importance of recycling and what it means for the environment. Next. So the next few slides show what of our impacts were and how many participants we had, as well as how many teams there were, countries, as well as states. As you can see, 2019 was a year where we had an overwhelming amount of support and participants in this Plastic Free EcoChallenge. We had 54 countries represented, 58 states and territories, but we had over 15,000 participants that had massive impacts in their communities. Next. So these are our last 2 years' numbers. We're currently in the process of calculating all of the numbers that we have for this year's, with half a month left. We're hoping that we can keep increasing that number. Each team, I think, is in the 40,000 plus points at this point. Next. So to put it in a bit of context and understanding, since 2018 when we started this through the 2021 challenge, 100,000 117.21 plastic straws that didn't go to the landfill, 143,800 plastic containers, 129,541 single-use water bottles, and 223,980 pieces of litter were picked up during the month of July. Next. We do have additional programs that are a bit more niche in what they do. We take part in a national movement called Gorillas on the Line. So a critical component of cell phones and other small electronics is a substance called coltan. One of the few places in the world where coltan is found is in the forests of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, right in the middle of gorilla habitat. As a result of mining for coltan, critical habitats have been destroyed and gorillas have been displaced or even killed by poachers. Recycling old phones, electronics, and any other things that's small handheld electronics raises money to directly support gorilla conservation initiatives through Gorilla Safe programs. Gorillas are on the line, so join us to help answer the call to save gorillas around the world. It's an annual global mobile phone recycling challenge organized by the Gorilla Safe engagement team and participants all around the world. Next. So in summary, I'm not sure if you want me to cover this or if you would like to do it, Amy.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So these are some of the things that we've hoped that you've taken away from this webinar. If you have any questions directly about what we do here at the zoo, please feel free to reach out to me. That's my email. Or if you see me walking around the zoo, feel free to stop me and ask any questions you might have. For anything that's related specifically to Plastic Free EcoChallenge, you're going to contact the other Christina Jarvis. She's the person that runs the campaign for us and helps us coordinate everything. So she would be better versed in answering any questions that you might have. And then if you're interested in participating in Plastic Free EcoChallenge, it's not too late to get involved, even though it's halfway through the country the month. Registration never closes. So you just have to visit plasticfree.ecochallenge.org, and it's free and open to anybody.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, so I want to reiterate that it's never too late to start making small little changes in your lifestyle. Like she provided a lot of examples, swapping out, disposable, anything single use and disposable, even if that means you're just switching out paper towels at your house to reusable cloths. All those little things do have an impact, and also there's usually a cost savings associated with making those lifestyle changes too. So your steps to reduce your plastic consumption in July can go far beyond just the month of July. So thank you, Christina. That was a lot of really interesting content stuff. I learned a lot of new things today too, and I appreciate you sharing those stats with us. I had a few questions that came in prior to today's webinar, and then also we've had a variety of questions coming through the chat box. So one question came from Brian. He wanted to know, he understands that there's an issue with microplastics from synthetic fibers like polyester and rayon and such ending up in the wastewater treatment plant, and he wants to know if there's anything that he can do to combat that microplastic issue. Do you have any experience, Christina, with like the washer attachments, or the dryer attachments, or maybe it is washer and dryer, I'm not for sure, where it's supposed to help actually capture the microplastics? Do you know anything about that?
So I haven't personally used those. However, I have heard good results, and you can do simple things like switching even like your dryer sheets for a wool ball, or when you do purchase your clothing items, look for things that don't contain those polyesters and rayons and acrylics and nylons. Those are the things that tend to shed the most microplastics. When you're washing things, always wash them on cold. That should be common. Anybody learned that from their mothers. Warm makes the colors bleed together. So if you're washing them on cold or minimum like a room temperature water, it helps decrease the shedding. Heat causes the fibers to fray more often. So I would just say, just be more intentional in your purchases. If you do want to try some of those attachments, I think that they have had great results. I myself have not used them, so I can't speak directly to them, but I have seen reviews for them that have been pretty good.
Yeah, so along the comment about using cold water, do you think also maybe letting your synthetic fibers, because if you already own the clothes, you know, you already made the purchase, you're not going to just throw that stuff away. Maybe also letting things air dry. Do you think that would also be helpful and not put them in the dryer?
Yeah, I mean, that sort of serves a multitude of sustainability
Yeah.
betterment. I mean, you're not using electricity in order to use your dryer, which is a very high electric intensive unit. Also, if your unit's not an Energy Star certified one by the EPA, that has another host of issues. So line drying or buying one of those like clothing racks that you can get literally anywhere, that's definitely a better alternative to drying them if you can avoid it.
Perfect. That's what I was thinking too. Thank you for sharing that. So a question came in about bamboo. Can a bamboo toothbrush be recycled here in Columbus? Unfortunately, no. However, your bamboo toothbrush, if it's all made from organic material, you can compost it. Now, if you have a backyard compost unit, you could throw it in there. It could take a while for it to break down. To help accelerate the decomposition, I'd recommend chopping it up. I'd also make sure that the bristles that you have on the bamboo toothbrush are not made from plastics. Obviously, that's not going to break down in your compost. But I have composted different bamboo cutlery in my backyard compost, and it's broken down. It just has taken a while, but it does not belong in the recycling bin. Another person asked a question about biodegradable glitter, and they wanted to know, Christina, where do you get biodegradable glitter?
So it's a relatively new product. It's like similar to the concept of balloons. So balloons and glitter are the two arts and crafts things that are very damaging to the environment. So I think I found it at a very small local place in Oklahoma when I lived there. However, I have to assume that larger manufacturers would be selling it at this point, or at least trying to. So I think places like that would be like arts and crafts stores like Michael's or maybe Hobby Lobby or things like that, that would sell those a wide variety of arts and crafts related things, or DIY stuff would probably be your best bet.
Yeah, okay. Also, I've seen people on Instagram use they hole punch leaves. So they get different cutouts of hole punches like hearts and stars, and then you can collect leaves in the fall. And that could be a natural biodegradable glitter option too.
Definitely. I haven't seen that. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, not as sparkly and fun, but it's a good learning lesson for the kids, so they understand why we're not using glitter and instead we're using nature. Okay, so those were a few questions that came in beforehand. Let me start going through the questions from the chats. So really great questions. Have several of them are coming through about compostable or biodegradable plastic bags for pet waste. This is such an interesting topic. I have a dog, I have kitties, and I understand how material breaks down at the landfill, AKA it really doesn't. And so SWACO owns and operates the landfill. We provide tours of the landfill. We want everyone to see the material up close and personal, see how we manage it to protect the community and the public health. But when it's all said and done, when we throw things away in our landfill, regardless if it's organic, biodegradable, compostable, it really doesn't break down. A landfill essentially is the opposite of a compost pile. It's entombing or mummifying the waste. So things that are classified as compostable still don't break down. There have been excavations of perfectly pristine heads of lettuce and packages of hot dogs that are over 50 years old at the bottom of a landfill, and they have not broken down at all. I mean, no mold, no decomposition whatsoever. There's no oxygen, there's no sunlight, materials simply don't break down. So don't waste your money and buy compostable bags or whatever they say, biodegradable bags for your pet waste if you're throwing your pet waste in the trash. What I would recommend to you instead is if you have, say you have a backyard and you've got, your pup goes out in the backyard or whatever it may be, get a pooper scooper. And maybe instead of using one bag every single day to pick up all the poop, you could instead use the pooper scooper to clean up the waste and then put it in that bag maybe once a week to then throw away in your trash. And I understand that may not be feasible. Maybe you don't have a backyard and you have to pick up every piece individually when you're on walks. The second idea I have for you, if you live in Franklin County, Ohio, all of the waste goes to a wastewater treatment plant where it is then turned into a fertilizer for agriculture fields. So that's right, our everyday waste that we flush down the toilet gets a second life as fertilizer. And so in theory, you could put your dog waste down the toilet. Don't put it in a compostable bag. Just put it loose like, all the other waste, and it will get turned into fertilizer for farm fields. Now, again, that's going above and beyond. And if you don't want to do all that, I understand. Just maybe try to limit the number of plastic bags you do purchase that then end up in the trash. A question came in about recycling that recycling that ends up in plastic bags. Is the material actually being recycled? This is such a good question, and it's an issue that Rumpke deals with on a regular basis. They really don't want the material to be bagged. However, they do make exceptions for entities such as schools, large event spaces, and some businesses. They will make exceptions because they understand it can be very challenging for those entities to always put their recyclables loose in the bin. And so the big concern when it comes to recycling, if it's going to be in a bag, is it must be in a clear bag. What this tells the folks at Rumpke is that they can see through the bin, they can see through the bag, and they know that the materials are truly recyclable. If it ends up in a black bag or another color bag, an opaque bag that they can't see through, they probably won't open the bag to go digging through it. Instead, it's going to get picked off the line and it's going to take a long detour to the landfill. So the biggest thing you can do is keep it loose. If that's not possible where you work or at your business, then having it in a clear bag is the second best bet. A question came in about fast fashion. It's so expensive to buy natural clothing. This is a very good observation, and thank you for making that comment, Michelle. It is very expensive to buy all organic clothing, cotton or whatever it may be. And so, you're going to have to make those decisions for your budget. We talked about some things can do to lessen the impact on the environment when it comes to those synthetic fibers. Christina gave us some really good strategies that we can use at home. We can try to use cold, we can wash our clothes less, and then we can hang dry any of our synthetic fibers if you've already made those purchases at home. And then maybe once your budget allows for it, instead of buying so many pieces of clothing that would be considered fast fashion or would be cheaper, try to make investments in those nicer pieces that can be diverse with different pairings of jackets and pants. And so they'll last longer, and then they'll also have some functionality to be paired with different pieces of clothing.
Something else that I actually wrote my thesis in grad school on fast fashion and the environmental sustainability impacts of it from a triple bottom line perspective. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Something that to keep in mind is that you don't necessarily need to purchase sustainable clothing in order to be considered sustainable. If you're purchasing things from thrift stores, from online thrift stores like ThredUp, or even if you're going to physical places in your town, that's considered a sustainable alternative to buying that fast fashion. So if you're unable to purchase those more expensive items, which I do think are becoming a bit more budget friendly, companies like Madewell, while it's still maybe $100 for a pair of jeans, I've had a pair of jeans since I was a sophomore in college, which was 8 years ago. that have lasted me this whole time. So they're very well made things. It's something to keep in mind. And like Amy said, if you can't invest in them now, maybe put a little bit of money aside to do things like a capsule wardrobe, or try and find statement pieces that you'll know that you'll wear a lot and that you can recycle through your through wearing tops or pants or whatever it might be, that can contribute to a more sustainable clothing item. So something to keep in mind is that it doesn't necessarily have to be new purchased products. Getting things from thrift stores is considered just as sustainable.
Great point, Christina. Thank you for mentioning that. We still have a number of questions that have come in. I'm trying to get those wrapped up before 2 o'clock here. Someone asked a question about where you can recycle styrofoam. So styrofoam can be recycled at in the city of Hilliard. They have a 24/7 drop box location where you can recycle any large blocks of styrofoam. So what that means is from like electronics packaging, from a cooler, from a food delivery company. What they don't accept is things like styrofoam peanuts and styrofoam food packaging from like egg cartons and cups from like McDonald's. So look up the City of Hilliard styrofoam drop off and you can take it there. Anyone in Franklin County can take their materials there. Does Rumpke collect recycled from other refuse companies? If not, where does it go? Judith, I think what you're referencing is Rumpke is the Central Ohio Recycling Processor for all of residential recycling. So it doesn't matter who your hauler is here in Franklin County, if it goes to Rumpke to be processed. If you're a business, if you are, recycling in your office space or like at a school or something like that, it's a little bit less clear. I can't tell you today where your material goes. There are a couple other recycling facilities operating in Franklin County that do handle some of the commercial stream. So if you want to learn more about that, Judith, just shoot me an email after today's webinar. I'll be happy to try to learn more about your situation and answer your question. Michael said, is this going to be a YouTube link that can be sent to family and friends? Absolutely, Michael. This recording will be sent out to everyone tomorrow at noon, or excuse me, at 1. You can share it with anyone that you so choose. It also will be made available on YouTube, on SWACO's YouTube channel, where we keep all of our content from our webinars and presentations. These can be shared with anybody. So yeah, another question just came in. Will it be recorded? Absolutely, it will be recorded. I will make sure everybody gets that tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It'll come to your email. Christina, do you have any last remarks? I want to thank everyone for joining us today.
No, just if there's any zoo employees that are on here or volunteers or whatever, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, or I work in the business building if you happen to be on grounds anywhere.
Well, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Everyone take care and good luck on your plastic-free July journey and beyond. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.